What's up, y'all? This is James Otto, and you are watching 98.7 The Bulls Skype Live Studio. I've been living in Nashville, I was saying earlier, I think like 18 years now. And during that time, I've been very blessed to be able to make my living as a songwriter, which means I sit around and make stuff up all day long, which is not a bad job if you feel creative, and sometimes it can be maddening because the rejection rate is pretty darn high. I think I've written nearly 2,000 songs since I've been in Nashville, and I've had about 30 different cuts on major label acts over the years. So 30 out of 2,000 isn't a very good average, but I think it's kind of the normal. So you write pretty much every day like a normal job. Like I'd say I sit down from like 10 to 5 o'clock just about every day and write something, try to get something written. And every once in a while, an artist will cut your song. And so when you have a cut, that means you're still not making any money until it gets on the radio, because that's the only way for songwriters to really make any money these days, is for songs to be on the radio. And so I've been lucky enough to have a couple of hits, but the best thing that's ever happened to me is I wrote a song with a really good friend of mine, Jamie Johnson. Y'all like Jamie Johnson? Thank you. After all the years that I've been in Nashville, a song like this, kind of, you never dream something like that's going to happen to you, like you get that kind of big cut. And Jamie and I were lucky enough to win ACM and CMA Song of the Year for this song, which was pretty cool. And thank you. And also, we got flown out to the Grammys, and although we didn't win, we lost to George Strait. And you know what? Losing to George Strait is a win in my book every day. It means I was in the game. So I'm going to play that song, if y'all don't mind. It's called In Color. I said, Grandpa, what's this picture here? It's on black and white, and it ain't real clear. Is that you there? You sit here, how's living? The times were tough back in 35. This is me and Uncle Joe just trying to survive a cotton farm. Great Depression. And if it looks like we were scared to death, like a couple of kids just trying to save each other, you should have seen it in color. This one he's taking overseas in the middle of hell, 1943. In the wintertime, you can almost see my breath. Well, that was my tail gunner, old Johnny McGee. He was a high school teacher from New Orleans, and he had my back right through the day we left. And if it looks like we were scared to death, like a couple of kids just trying to save each other, you should have seen it in color. A picture's worth 1,000 words, but you can't see what those shades of gray keep cover. You should have seen it in color. Well, the day we wrote this song, we were talking about America's heroes, our men and our women who fight around the world for us on a night just like tonight. See, I come from a military family, and my dad was a drill sergeant for 23 years in the U.S. Army. And growing up, I always wondered why my dad was such a pain in my ass. Because he was hard on me. And he wanted me to do the right things all the time. And when you're a teenager, that isn't always an easy thing to do. And I don't think I really understood or respected what he was trying to do until I joined the Navy at 19 years old. And by the time I turned 21, I'd been around the world. I'd been in over 30 different countries. And I came back with a much greater and deeper respect for my father and for all our men and women over there doing an incredibly difficult job. Well, my grandfather, he was a Korean War vet. And long before I was ever born, he was in some godforsaken jungle halfway around the world fighting for his life. And I've wondered many times, what is it that makes a man wake up in those kind of conditions and want to fight their way out instead of laying down and dying? Because I know there's days they feel like doing that. And I'm not sure that I've come up with a very good answer for all men and what motivates them, but I know what motivated my grandfather. And that was seeing my grandmother again. And they were married for over 50 years, y'all. And anybody that's been married for 5 minutes knows that 50 years is a hell of a long time. It's kind of like a war all in itself. Now, my grandfather was one of the strongest men I'd ever met. And I really only saw him cry one time in my whole life. That was the day they laid my grandmother in the ground after she lost her battle with breast cancer. And that's what love should do to you. It should make you want to live and die for somebody else. And I know that my grandfather would have gladly traded places with my grandmother if he could. Because that's just the kind of man he was. And that's exactly what we wrote this song about, is that kind of sacrifice. Well, this one is my favorite one. This is me and Grandma with the summer sun all dressed up. The day we set our vows. You can't tell it's you, but it was hot that June. That rose was red and her eyes were blue. And just look at that smile. I was so proud. That's the story of my life. Right there in black and white. And if it looks like we were scared to death, like a couple of kids just trying to save each other, you should have seen it in color. A picture's worth 1,000 words, but you can't see what those shades of gray keep covered. You should have seen it in color. Yeah, 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 yeah. You should have seen it in color. Well, I said, Grandpa, what's this picture here? It's on black and white, and it ain't real clear. Is that you there? He said, yeah, How was love on? Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Well, they said 4 songs. Y'all want another one? Perfect. First off, I'll tell you about that song right there. The funny thing is that song, when we wrote it, people have asked me many times how come I didn't cut the song myself. And the reason why I didn't cut it was my album was actually finished and sitting on store shelves when we wrote that song. And Jamie didn't have a record deal at the time, and he was making an independent record, which turned out to be that Lonesome Song record, which is an amazing country album. And during that time, the song had gone on hold for Trace Adkins, and then had a backup hold, I think, with Alan Jackson. And those two guys kind of fought it out about who would cut the song. And it went back and forth for a little while, and eventually Trace Adkins won out, and he cut the song. Actually, you can get it on iTunes. His version is out there. But one day I got a very angry phone call from Trace's producer, and Trace's producer is Frank Rogers. He produces all kinds of other acts, Brad Paisley, Josh Turner, all kinds of people that y'all know and love. He's a fantastic guy and a fantastic producer. But he's like, hey, what the hell's going on with our song? I said, well, what do you mean? As far as I know, y'all are cutting it, right? It's going to be a single. He said, no. He said, Trace got on The Apprentice, and it delayed the release of his album by a year. And during that time, Jamie had put out that Lonesome Song, and Mercury Records took notice of that record out on iTunes and signed him to a record deal, and that was the first single off that album. And I was terrified, honestly, because the odds of a new act breaking through and actually doing well are extremely, extremely slim. And at the time when that song came out, I was as broke as I'd ever been. I was literally like in the poorhouse, and I'm thinking, man, Jamie's going to pull a song from Trace Adkins, who's on The Apprentice, who's a humongous star right now, and that really seems stupid. I guess that's one of those things, though, you just got to kind of trust in God. He definitely knew what was the better thing to happen, and I could not be prouder to be part of that record. So thank you guys so much for listening to that.